have a show for you today.
My father introduced me, and now it's my son's turn. Woodworking is a passion we'll share forever. Woodcraft understands that. Their people know the right tool for the job, and they make sure we understand how to use it. Their help? It means a lot. Woodcraft knows how we feel because they feel the same way. You know, I enjoy sharing my secrets, and now Jake's teaching me some things too. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Tight Bond Wood Glues, the pro's advantage.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Can Do That. I'm your host, Chad Stanton. And as you probably guessed, today's project is our Marshmallow Catapult. You know, I thought this was going to be a really easy project, and of course, I was wrong. See, I started watching this documentary on them, and I noticed that the design that was on the show had a hanging basket. So this was my first prototype, and I put $5 worth of quarters in there, and I got about 4 foot of launch out of that. So continuing in the documentary, I noticed there was another design that had the weight in line with the arm. So once again, I placed $5 worth of quarters in there. I even thought I'd get fancy with changing the angle of the arm. And again, I got about 4.5 feet. This was not working for me. So I started looking at some photos online of actual old catapults, and I noticed some of them had like this rope going through it. And then it kind of hit me. It reminded me of a bow saw. See, the bow saw has a string on it, and as you wrap this around, it becomes tighter. So the light bulb went on, and I thought, why not make my catapult similar to the bow saw? So this was the third prototype. I put some cotton wound string in here, and with these knobs, I can change the tension of it. So I was liking that a lot, and it went farther. It went about 10 to 12 feet, but that's not good enough. Came to model number 4. This time I changed the string to a nylon string. I put a few more windings in it, so now I could get about 25 feet with this guy. Now I'm feeling good, but I was kind of overthinking it in the design. I thought I needed a bearing on the arm to keep it shooting nice and straight. And it not only wasn't necessary, I also didn't like the look of it. So that comes to the final one here. On this one here, I increased the windings. I made a few changes as far as the hole size and the hole placement. I have this adjuster so I can change the release of the projectile, or marshmallow in this case. And I added one more thing, a firing pin. This baby can shoot up to 30 feet. So this is the one we're going to be building today. So let me break down and show you the anatomy of our catapult. It's going to consist of these main components here. And so up on top, we're going to be making a bridle joint. The bridle joint is essentially half of these two cut out, and they're joined together on the edge. Coming down the support, well, we're going to have a half lap. And these two are joined on the face. And then the last thing we're going to do is the base pieces, well, they're just notched out. So these are the main components we're going to be doing, and we're going to be doing this with just a handsaw and a chisel. So let me get set up, get some other pieces in here, and I'll show you how we're going to make those joints. I have the bottom piece here for the catapult, and it's this rail. I want to add the half lap joint to it. Now, all these sizes are included at the plans at the end of the video, and this pencil line represents where I'm going to start the half lap joint. I also have the center support that will be going into it, and it's always best to be matching your cuts and your fits to the actual workpiece. So I'm going to take my chip carving knife and I'm actually going to push it into the pencil line and hold it there. Now I'm going to bring the workpiece up. So now I'm going to move the knife to the other side and make another mark. Now I can use my square to go across that. And I'll do the same up here. Now I have to do half of the width of this. So I'm first going to measure it. And I'm just over 3/4, 13/16. So I need to be just a little heavy of 3/8. And I'm going to check both sides here to make sure I have the middle. Yeah, that's really close. So now I will make my line. Do this on both sides. And I'm going to carry this line over. So I can put my pencil right in my knife mark. And this is the material that I need to cut out. So I'm going to use a bench hook. So I'm going to put my workpiece on here and hold it against the fence. And now I'm going to use my chip carving knife. And here's how I like to hold it. I'm going to hold the chip carving knife almost like I'm riding a motorcycle. So my fingers wrap all the way around it. And then my thumb is going to be ahead of it. And I'm pulling the fingers towards my thumb, making like a V cut to it. And when I get to the edge, I don't keep going straight because I don't want to cut my finger. As I get there, I'll pull it down in. So I have a straight edge here and a V notch going this direction. Now I have to turn it around for the other side. And I'll repeat the same thing. What that does is it gives me a straight shoulder for my saw to go into. And now with the saw, I'm going to cut down to that line. Now I like to use my thumb here to stabilize the saw. And once I get going, gonna check to see how I did. All right, I just went a hair over, but I'm not too worried about that. And I'll make the other cut. Looks good. All right. Now, with my chisel, I'm going to try and break this away, and I'm going to work up to that pencil line there. I'm tapping to about halfway, and then I'm going to flip it over and work the other direction. Okay, I have a file and a rasp that I can use to help smooth that out, but I first want to test my fit. It's actually pretty good. And I'm going to try and match and do the opposite to the other piece to make them mate together. So I have my upright support here, and I've gone ahead already and measured to find the middle and marked it on all 3 sides. I also went ahead and marked the height, of which I've already scored, and made my V-trench in this. And now I'm going to cut down to the line. Okay, I could use the saw and cut this out, but instead I'm going to use the chisel. So I'm going to come here to my vise, and I'm not going to put the chisel right on that line. I'm actually going to take a little bit at a time. Okay, I'm almost to that line. I'll fine-tune it with the rasp, but let me just see how I'm doing. Okay. Well, it's a pretty good fit, but I have to keep filing away on that till this is flush. So I'll do that with the rasp, and then I'll show you how we're going to make the bridle joint. The bridle joint is very much like the half flap, except the bridle joint is going on the edge of the board instead of the face. So let me finish tuning this piece and I'll show you that next. I made the bridle joint cut, and there's a couple different ways you could do this. Now I want to point out that this bridle joint is actually deeper than the half flap. And so because I've got more material to remove, I sometimes can have a little bit of trouble doing that. So there's a couple of different ways you could cut this out. You can make 2 straight cuts down, and then with your saw, come across at about 45 degrees. That removes most of the material. Then you can take the chisel, and it's a lot easier to remove that waste. I'd flip it over, do the same thing, work it to the line. The next one I could do is make my 2 cuts down, and then this time use a coping saw. And I would bring the coping saw in, and I can make the cut going across, trying to stay on that line. And then once again, come back in with the chisel and try and clean it up right to that depth line. The third way I could do it is I could make a series of cuts going across, and then I can put my chisel in and break away the material. And once again, clean it up to the line. Whichever method you choose to do, that's up to you. At any rate, I'm going to fine-tune this so I can get my bridle joint to fit together. And from here then, I need to drill a hole in it. And I'll show you that next. I have my mark laid out here on the center support, and I need to drill a 1/2 inch hole through it. Now I have a scrap piece of wood underneath it so I don't damage the bench, and also when this drill bit comes through, it has a tendency to want to blow out the fibers, and so this will help prevent that. I also want to make sure that I put a chamfer around the edge of this because the string is going to go through this hole, and I don't want any sharp edges possibly fraying or cutting through the string. So I'll use a countersink bit to do that. I'm going to do this on both sides. All right, next I can take my pieces, I can glue them up, and then we'll move on to the next step. So while I have these pieces in the clamp drying, I can work on my base rails. Now the base rail is very similar to the piece that I'm using for the bridle joint. You'll notice that it's not the same in length, but the spacing between the notches is the same, and that's very important. However, unlike the bridle joint where I had to notch it on both pieces, I'm not going to be doing that for the bottom rail because it's just sitting in there for support. All right, I have one more to do for the back, and then I can glue all three of these together and move on to the next step. I'm getting ready to make the knobs now. Now the knobs are a different type of wood. I'm building this out of poplar, and it's rather soft, but when it comes to the actual knobs, I need a harder wood for it. The reason being is you can see on my prototype here that I just used pine, which was a soft wood, and when I was tightening it up and putting tension on it, the string was actually sinking into the knob. Now the knob itself is 2 1/4 inch in diameter. So I have my compass set up, and I'll make a circle. Next, I want to make these notches going all the way around it. So without changing the setting on my compass, I'm going to walk that around. Now I'm going to clamp this down. And I'm going to use a 3/8 bit to drill these holes. Next, I want to make these 2 holes here, and so I'm going to switch to a 5/16 bit, and I'm going to measure over about 1/4 inch or so, and I'll drill those holes. And once again, I'm going to use that countersink bit to put a chamfer around all the holes. I'm gonna do this to both sides. So here's a nice tip for you. If you have access to a drill press, you can take a 2 1/4 inch hole saw, take the center bit out, and with the drill press you can come down even and smooth and cut that out. But if you don't have one, don't try doing it without that center bit. And in this case, you can't use the center bit because we need those 2 holes there. So in this case, I'm going to have to put it in the vise, and I'm going to have to use a coping saw to try and cut this out. So this is going to take me a little while, so let's get back when I have it done. I'm starting to put these front angle pieces on. Now these are all just simply cut at 45 degrees on the miter saw, and I already have the first one in place. Now normally you would think that you could just drive your nail in this direction and put it on, but if I do that, as I'm hitting with the nail, it's going to want to move this along, which will probably give me a little bit of problem. So the solution for that is I'm going to pre-drill going down perpendicular to this. Now in order to start drilling down, I am going to first start here a little bit on an angle, and then I'm going to work the bit up. And I'll do the same to the other side. All right, bring the piece in here. A little bit of glue. And I'll tap them in. I'll finish putting them flush with the nail set, and I'll continue doing the other 2, and then I'm going to work on making these back angle supports. So I'll get back to you with that. Now you'll notice that the rear brace, it's not on the same rail as the front one, so I had to add this bottom plate. And I did that by pre-drilling and then just nailing the plate in there. Now when it comes to figuring out the rail, again you'll notice that this is not running parallel with this one. So that tells me right away that these are not cut at 45 degrees like the front ones. So how do I know what that angle is? I'll first begin by measuring from the support here down to that plate. And I can then use a bevel to find that angle. Now what's the number on that angle? This doesn't have any kind of gauge to it. So I can go over to my miter saw, place the bevel in there, move to where the blade would line up with the bevel, and then I can read my number. In this case, I have 35. I know every triangle is made up of 180 degrees. If this is 35, coming down here, this would be 90, and if I take those 2 numbers and subtract them from 180, I'm left with 55. So that's the other angle that I would cut on the saw. I have both of them done here, and I want to drill a series of holes in them. This will give me different placements for this pin that will be going through it. Now I have the holes spaced out at 1.5 inches, and I want to drill them both at the same time. So I'll take some tape, line them up and tape them together. And again, with a scrap piece of wood, so I don't drill into my bench. I'll clamp that on there, and I'm going to drill these holes slightly larger because the dowel pin that I have going through here, well, the dowel pin is 1/4 inch, and if I drill the holes at 1/4 inch, I'm probably going to have some resistance. So I'm going to drill them slightly larger at 5/16. I'm also going to put a chamfer around it just to smooth up any rough edges, and again to make it easier for the dowel pin to go through. All right, let me drill these holes, and then I'll get back with you for the next step. So I have the components in front of me for what will be the finished arm. The bottom of it here, I've measured and found the middle on the side, and I'm going to drill a 1/4 inch hole all the way through. Now, a tip on drilling nice and straight is you'll go about halfway, flip it over, and drill it again. And then also, too, I added that chamfer because the string will be going through that, and I want to try to eliminate any kind of cutting or fraying of the string. On the end of it, I find the center, and again, I'm going to drill a 1/4 inch hole in it, and that's going to take the dowel rod. It's important that I drill this 1/4 inch hole as straight as possible for when the dowel rod goes in it. I don't want it leaning to one side or the other. Now, for the dowel rod, I'm using an oak dowel rod here because this is going to be under a lot of tension, and I want something that's going to be strong. So I didn't feel that the poplar would be good enough for it. And again, when picking a dowel rod, you want to make sure that it's nice and straight. You don't want it to have any kind of bow to it. Also, too, because it's going to be under a lot of pressure, I'm going to want that hole to be at least a 1/2 inch deep. Now for the basket. The basket I've done, and I've got some layout lines here. First on my board, I found the center. Then with the compass, I made the circle. Okay, now for the hole, I didn't just use a drill bit and drill straight down. I wanted it more tapered, like a basket. So I'm going to use the countersink for this. It does a pretty nice job. Now, cutting this out, I'm going to use my coping saw, and I'm going to cut all of this away. After I remove that, I can use a rasp and file, sand it a little bit smoother, and then to the miter saw where I'll make the cross cut. After I have that, on the bottom, again, I'm going to find the center and drill that 1/4 inch hole, and again, at least a 1/2 inch for the dowel rod to go in. Now, you don't have to get this elaborate with the basket. You could do something as simple as just drilling a hole into a piece of wood. So let me glue this up and get it ready to go. All right, now while I'm letting this dry, I'm going to put it on the bench where it's flat, and I'm going to make sure that I have it in line. So the bench is giving me something for it to register on so that the arm will be nice and straight. All right, once that dries, we can get to start lacing up our string and put this all together. I'm getting ready to start putting the string through. Now, this is where all the strength to this comes from. The more windings I can get laced through here, the more power I'm going to have. So let me show you how I'm doing that. I have this nylon string and a toothpick that I taped it to, because trying to fit that string through all these holes can be a little tricky. Now going through this, I'm going to pick one of these holes, go through the support, I'm going to pass it through the arm one time, again through the other support, through one of the holes, and these blocks really help hold these pieces in place. As you can see, it's a little awkward to start with. And I'm going to pull a lot of string through this because you won't have a second chance. I'm going to pull about 7 or 8 feet worth. Now when I come back through, I'm going through the opposite hole, again through the support, one more time through the arm, through the support, and into the other hole. Careful not to tangle the string or get any knots in it. Now that's the last time we're actually going to go through the arm. Now we're going to start doing a process of going over and under. So as I come through the first hole again, I'm going to have this one go over the arm. Come back through. Now I have to make sure that this laces under the arm and come through the opposite hole again. And I'm going to repeat this process of over and under as many times as I can. Two things are either going to happen. I'm either going to run out of string, or I'm not going to be able to get the string through the holes anymore. So let's see how many windings I can get. Okay, so I got 5 windings on it, and I think that's about as far as it's going to go. So now I'm going to tie it off. I'll go ahead and cut the string. Now, because this is nylon, it's like plastic, see how this frays on me? Well, here's a cool little trick. If you take a lighter and just heat it for a second, it'll melt the nylon, and then you can, with your fingers, twist it tight again. Don't get it too hot because it can burn your fingers. Okay, I'll just tie a knot on this. Cut these strings. So even though I made the knot, again, I just melted it a little bit, hopefully make that knot nice and tight. All right, let's put some tension on this. And the way this works is I'm going to twist them both towards me. That a little straight. There you go, it's working. All right, a couple little pieces to finish this up, and then we'll start shooting some marshmallows. So I've just finished putting on the final touches. The top piece is just glued and nailed on, and then I have this eye hook down here at the bottom with a hole drilled into the basket. This is if I want to make that release pin for it. Now, this can be put under a lot of tension, and there's a chance that this could break, depending on how aggressive you're wrapping this. So it may not be a bad idea to put some string wrapped around here where the arm is going to be making contact. You could switch to a larger dowel, but that might actually slow down some of the acceleration of it. And the wrap itself, well, it just kind of looks overall cool to the whole project. Speaking of wraps, that just about wraps up this project. I think you'll have a ton of fun with this, and who knows if you scaled this up, what you could actually be doing with it. So tune in next time for another episode of I Can Do That, and we'll see you right back here where we're making more stuff.